Betsy, Shirley, who's out there? Betsy Lou Who? How are you, darling? I'm running late. I know. As a running late. I was trying to upload the picture onto my. No. Nina's texting me. Are you all right? Are you okay? She always panics. Ori, quit panicking. Twitch a panicking. I know you didn't see me, but I's here. I was trying to get the thumbnail done. I'm the least of your worries right now, child. Don't you even be worrying about me. I be where I supposed to be when I supposed to be there. Okay. Is Cate gonna be here? Music. Oh, crud. Mm-hmm. My TV controller is all the way over on my desk. I can't play music tonight. Or you'll be all right. Deep breath. See, that's how you do it. Don't do that because you get pollen in your nose and then you be sneezing like Minnie Mouse the rest of the night. And Princess will be laughing at you. Hey, Kate. How are you, darling? Sorry, I was running a little bit late tonight. Let's go ahead and get started. It's 10 after now. I gave me an extra 5 minutes there. So let's go ahead and get started, and then people will pile in as they can. So, Kate, is there anything particular you want me to read? I was planning on just reading the first 3 chapters or until time ran out. So, chapter 1. Sheriff Cade Myers strode along Main Street. He left his car at the sheriff's station. When he had an early morning shift, he preferred to park his car and walk Main Street, an old-fashioned beat cop habit. He was no longer a big city homicide detective. And y'all, I'm gonna be yawning tonight. Oh, what's wrong? I'm not sleepy. The book's not boring. It's just I don't think I get enough oxygen in my system. Although I was yawning in there with Mike a while ago too, so who knows? He enjoyed the much slower pace of Eldred. Both he and the citizens benefited from his early morning patrol. He became familiar with early risers and their routines, and for them, they felt secure in knowing he was an active sheriff, not just a pencil pusher and an administrator. Kate took in a deep breath of the crisp fall air. It was not cold yet, but there was a nip in the air. He loved fall. He looked down the line of seasonally decorated street lamps with bright red bows and a string of multicolored lights running the space between posts, feeling nostalgia. The early Christmas lights didn't clash with the jack-o'-lanterns at the base of the lampposts or the witches, ghosts, and goblins on business doors and windows. The time encompassing Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas and New Year's Day was Kate's most favorite time of the year. And I absolutely hate it. He loved the activities all the holidays entailed. This would be his second year spending the holidays in Eldred. As a picture of a beautiful woman came to mind, he smiled. Hopefully, he wouldn't be alone this holiday season like last year. He had spent last holiday season alone on duty as the newly arrived sheriff. As he neared the bakery, Old Man Potter stood from retrieving the newspapers in front of his door. "Morning, Sheriff." Cade smiled. Potter was insistent about having a hard copy of the newspaper. The Eldred Gazette was a dinosaur that put out a small morning edition of the local news. It had surprised Cade when he first got to Eldred. He hadn't known a single person back in the city that didn't go get their news and information via the internet and social media. "Morning, Clyde. How's Betty?" Cade asked after Potter's wife. "Oh, you know her, forever a morning gal. She's in there setting out some new pastries." Potter turned to shout through the open door, "Betty, Cade's here." There was a short silence, and then Betty appeared wearing her usual bright, bubbly smile and Halloween-themed apron, holding a basket with an assortment of muffins. "Dang it, I hate this. Drives me crazy." I just learn to quit talking. "Oh, Cade, lovely to see you. How's Mary?" Cade smirked. The old busybody wasn't just the best baker in 50-mile radius. She did double duty as the town's biggest gossip. "I believe Mary is just fine. Did you hear something otherwise?" Betty started to say something, but Clyde gave her a gentle nudge. Of course not. She was just asking at oh, of course not. She was just asking of Mary after Mary. Betty, go on and give the sheriff his basket. Betty's comely smile spread across her face, enhancing her rosy cheeks. Holding aloft the basket of goodies, she told him, These are for you and your men. These are for you and your men. I've included some pumpkin spice ones for the season. Have a good day, Sheriff. Cade tapped a finger in the brim of his hat and took the basket. Thank you, Miss Betty. Y'all have a good one. The couple waved and Cade continued down the street. He had gone no more than 2 blocks when old Jeb called out from the doorway of the general store. Morning, Sheriff. Fine sunrise, ain't it? Cade tapped the brim of his hat, this time in greeting rather than farewell. Morning, Jeb. Yes, the sunrise was gorgeous. How's Susie doing today? She's just great, thanks to you. She was feeling scared stuck on that mountain road with the flat until you showed up and changed it for her. It's no problem. That's what I'm here for. Although a young girl traveling alone should know how to change her tire and keep her cell phone charged. Shaking his head, Jeb said, I just don't understand why she didn't have her charger with her. She's constantly on that thing. Lord, these old man voices are wearing my throat out already. Kate shook his head as if to say he didn't know either. Kids today rarely think beyond the present. She'll be more careful now that she's had a little scare. Jeb laughed. I wished I could say you're probably right. Knowing my Susie, she'll forget the charger again, and I'm pretty sure she didn't watch you change that tire, so she'd know how to do it next time. Cade laughed. You know your child well. She mostly stood off to the side and talked about the new store in the mall. Jeb smiled. That's about right. He pushed his ball cap off his head and peeked up at Cade. How's Mary? Cade's eyes narrowed. As far as I know, she's fine. Is there something you want to tell me, Jeb? Jeb turned fire engine red. No. I was just asking after. Y'all went out on that date, and I was just wondering is all. Shaking his head, tapping his brim in goodbye, Cade said, Mary's fine. Thanks for asking, Jeb. Have a good one. Cade continued until the very end of Main Street, where the sheriff's station and jail was on the right. Across the street were twin 4-story buildings which housed the municipal offices and the courthouse. On the remaining blocks to his office, he had been asked after Mary's welfare no less than 6 times, and the not so subtle hints about his date with Mary. He still wasn't used to the small town grapevine. Cade was a private man. He wasn't sure he liked everyone treating his first date with Mary like Saturday night at the movies. Although his dating Mary was new, his feelings for her were not. 14 months ago, he'd accepted the offer of sheriff to the small hamlet of Eldred, New York. He had been an NYPD homicide detective for 10 years. He was burnt out. He needed a change. Losing his partner in a shootout after tracking a serial killer had been Cade's last straw. He put in for a transfer to another department. He'd been dating an ADA, Paula Shells. She suggested that a different department of the same machine may not be a big enough change. The minute she said it, Cade felt it to his marrow. It wouldn't be big enough. He needed to get away. He had started his search for another position that night. The ad for an immediate position with the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office called to him. He had known the position for the sheriff until he arrived for his interview. The former sheriff had a massive coronary and died suddenly. Turned out to be the change he needed. The small town was vastly different and also the same as big city crime fighting. Cade was just slipping into his groove a month after his arrival when he had found Mary. He strode into the sheriff's office, and as soon as the door closed, the dispatcher receptionist, Sally Phone, assailed him. He sighed, mentally preparing himself for an encounter with Sally. The woman was a character. Where have you been? Things are brewing. Sally had dramatic flair about her. Everything was either dead, boring, or DEFCON 1. There was never a middle setting with her. Sighing, handing her the basket of muffins, Cate passed her. Do you mind if I get to my office first? Sally trailed after him as he rounded the high receptionist desk, past the bullpen of the deputy's desk to his office. His eyes hit his chair, and Sally began. Putting the basket down on his desk and waving several pink message slips, she moved her bifocals from the top of her head to her eyes. Let's see here. That fancy New York DA called to remind you of a case coming up that you're testifying in. She placed the slip on his desk. An agent with the Marshal Service called and said he'd be here about 8. She put another slip on top of that. What does the Marshal Service want with me and Eldred? Beats me. You'll find out at 8. Mr. Simmons called to let you know he's out of the hospital, and the specialist said there's no permanent damage to the nerves in his hand. Thank God, Cate said with feeling. I have to find this nuisance before he kills someone. As though Cate hadn't spoke, Sally placed the next slip on top of the rapidly growing stack and continued. The mayor has approved you as one of the available bachelors to be auctioned off at the holiday charity dinner. Hey, I didn't request to be a bachelor. Cate scowled in frustration. Sally simply replied, Yes, you did, shaking his head in confusion. I did not. Cate shut his mouth when he noticed the calculating gleam in Sally's bright blue eyes. And why do I want to be a bachelor? Because you want Mary to bid on you. Cate smirked. It seemed the whole town knew about his interest in the beautiful librarian. There was one thing he did miss about the city, its anonymity. He had been looking forward to the much slower pace of this job in town. However, the gossip was annoying. Eldred had lived up to the small town lore. The scenery was fantastically panoramic. It was quiet, low crime, and people did leave their doors unlocked. Everywhere, everyone knew everyone else and minded everyone's business. The Eldred community was a small mix of mostly white, few blacks, even fewer Hispanics, and a spattering of other ethnicities. It boasted impressive vistas, farmland, surrounding mountains, and narrow, winding roads. The unused to silence went a long way in helping Cate to relax. The city had never been quiet. The crime in the city was high. The crime rate in Eldred was low. It was almost non-existent. That is until a couple of months ago. A prankster was going around town wreaking havoc. The fool even left a calling card by marking the crime scenes with a painted red X. First was the stolen mascot, a goat of all things. The red mark had been left on the gate of the goat's pen. Then came the slashing of the school bus tires with a red X garishly painted on each window of the bus. Due to the fact there being only 3 buses for the entire town and one of the buses had been in the shop for repairs, school had been canceled. Then came the fire alarm pulled at the high school. The red X was left on an art classroom door, and the kids were sent home early while his deputies investigated. There hadn't been much to investigate. The school didn't have video like its more modern counterparts in the state. The paint had been left out in the open classroom where anyone could have painted the X. Since it wasn't a scheduled fire drill, the students had rushed the door before the teachers could get order. Fingerprints on the paint can were just as useless. No telling how many people handled the can in public school. Forensics was not the way to go in this case. Eldred didn't have its own crime lab or at CSU. If there were forensics needed, it would be shipped to the state lab. Kate assumed the pranksters was just some dumb kid that didn't want to go to school or was bored and liked watching the school's activities disrupted. Up until 2 days ago, the pranks had been harmless. The school's principal, Frank Simmons, had nearly gotten his hand blown off with a cherry bomb when he went to get his mail. The red X had been left on the ground in front of the mailbox. Frank said he hadn't seen the X until he was on his ass, holding one hand in the other, experiencing the worst pain he had ever felt in his life. He was lucky. The damage could have been worse. In Cade's mind, big city versus small town was winning. He liked being able to go home at night and having time to himself to pursue a hobby, or in this case, a woman. I'll be some man's hobby. Jackie! Welcome to the party. Where's Miss Shirley at, y'all? I can ask Mary out without putting myself on the auction block. Why is everyone in this town so interested in my love life? Sally smiled and proceeded to school him in the ways of a small town. Come on, Sheriff. Everybody loves a love story, especially in a small town, and love being in on it from the beginning. Besides, yours and Mary's is a doozy. It's like one of those romance books my daughter reads. You guys are fascinating. Sally put her glasses back on top of her head as she continued. I mean, really, you're a new sheriff in town, young, single, good-looking, great physique, and white. Mary is black, young, gorgeous, sweet as the day is long, kind, loves kids and animals. Sally paused for dramatic effect. And holy shit, the girl doesn't remember a blessed thing about her life before you found her out cold, drenched on that dark road 13 months ago. She woke up and you're the first person she saw. She was hooked. Sally gave another pause to bat her eyelashes and give a dreamy smile. You gotta love that. Her smile turned teasingly. Besides, you guys sort of eat each other up with your eyes when you meet. Your voice goes about 2 octaves lower when you speak to her, and hers goes all breathy. Cade regarded his dispatcher with a mixture of annoyance and affection. She reminded him of his mother. No tact or filter to speak of. Whatever was in her head came out of her mouth. Sally, ever hear of tact and diplomacy? Lying and deceitfulness? Yes, I've heard of them. Don't cotton to those ideas. Her glasses slipped down her forehead to her nose. By the way, Mary called too. She placed another pink slip on the pile. She got another one, this time on her back door. Damn it! Yet another asshole I need to catch. You mean nuisance? Sally corrected. No, I damn well don't. The prankster is a nuisance, but this guy harassing Mary is an asshole. A dangerous one. He is rapidly approaching a line which will have him crossing into felony territory. Frowning, Sally suggested, do you think it could be someone from her past? Cade lifted and dropped his shoulders in confusion. What past? She doesn't have one. I sent her prints to every federal, local, and private database I could think of, put her picture in the local news outlets and surrounding counties, all to no avail. If it is someone from her past, why wait 13 months to start this shit? Kate shook his head. No, it's someone she's met since being in Eldred. I find that hard to believe. Everyone adores her. They may not know who she was, but they sure as hell know who she is now. Kate couldn't dispute that. Mary had a loving sweetness that drew people in. Her exceptional beauty first made her appear unapproachable. Her shy smile automatically put people at ease. It certainly worked its magic on him. He remembered the night he found her. He had been on his way home and spotted a dark patch on the side of the road. The darkening sky was still light enough for him to see that whatever caused the patch was out of place. He parked his vehicle to investigate. After a full month of nothing but paperwork and budget meetings, finding an unconscious female on the side of the road with head trauma had ramped up his adrenaline. He had called for an ambulance and waited at the hospital to hear the news about her condition from the doctor. She had suffered a severe concussion, cracked ribs, and had needed several stitches to close the wound at the back of her head. The extent of her trauma wasn't realized until she opened those beautiful brown eyes, looking deeply into his, and said, "Who are you? Wait, who am I?" Considering the extensive search for her identity he conducted, Kate seriously doubted Mary Stalker was from her past. No, he was just creepy, leaving suggestive notes and gifts. Soon, Kate had to identify the stalker before the nut job decided on a close encounter with Mary. For now, he was keeping his distance. Kate shrugged. "I can't think of anyone who doesn't like her either. Technically, we're not looking for someone who dislikes her. It's someone obsessed with her, imagining a relationship with her. He's dangerous. I'll get him." "I know you will, Sheriff," Sally supported. She turned to leave, adding, "Don't forget to call your fancy schmancy New York City DA." Cade laughed at Sally's reverse snobbery, picking up the phone before he could dial his morning deputy knocked on the open door. "Morning, Deputy Boyd." Cade replaced the receiver. "What's up?" "Morning, Sheriff. I did a patrol of the high school and surrounding area before coming in like you asked. All was quiet." Nodding, Cade picked up the phone and dismissed Boyd. "Thanks. You can catch up on your paperwork and then resume normal patrol, adding an extra one around the school." Boyd left and Sally returned with a tall man dressed in a crisp business suit. His look and body language screamed Fed. Silently cursing, Cade hung up. "Sheriff, this here is U.S. Marshal Zach Duncan. He needs to bend your ear." Cade put on his civil servant smile and indicated his visitor's chair, glancing at his watch. It wasn't 8 yet. Whatever the marshal wanted was important. "What can I do for you, Marshal Duncan?" "Well, as you know, we run the WITSEC programs." And at Kay's nod, he elaborated. "One of our witnesses was placed in your jurisdiction. You know her as Mandy Odessa, the elementary school teacher. She just took a personal leave of absence." Duncan was instantly suspicious. "And how do you know that?" Cade chuckled. It had taken him a while to get used to a small town gossip mill. It worked better than AT&T. I'm guessing you're not too familiar with small towns. You can sneeze at one end of town and someone at the other end is handing you a tissue and saying, "God bless you." Well, perhaps this rumor mill can help us locate her. She missed 2 check-ins and I've just been to her place. It looks deserted. We've intercepted chatter that the infamous hitman Never Miss is headed this way to take care of her. I've heard about that guy when I was with NYPD. There are an awful lot of murders attributed to him. He's like an urban legend. Is he for real? The bodies he left in his wake are real. This Never Miss, can't believe adults actually dubbed him that, seems bigger than he is or otherworldly because no one has ever gotten a look at the guy. The most we have on him is a grainy photo at an airport. He's a man, not some ghost. Therefore, he can be captured and sent to prison. Mandy Odessa's eyewitness account against the Dolka crime family is coming up in Chicago. It's imperative that I find her. Okay, Marshal. Why don't you make your way to my SUV outside, the one closest to the door, and we'll head over to the elementary school to see if we can find out where Mandy was headed. I just need to make a call." Duncan left and Cade successfully dialed Mary's cell phone number. Getting no answer, he dialed the public library. Again, getting no answer, he hung up, thinking his small town was taking on traits of the big city he left behind. Checking his weapon on his hip, Cade made his way to his car, Worrying about Mary, he began ticking off the illegal activity that seemed to crop up overnight. A prankster, a stalker, a missing witness, and a possible hitman on the way. Small town living, peaceful, serene, quiet, bullshit. Chapter 2. Checking in with everybody. Sounds like a really good book, doesn't it? Cate pulled into the elementary school just as classes were beginning. Marshal Duncan, following him, looked around with a shell-shocked expression. Is this it? Cate quirked a brow. Didn't you see it when you placed Mandy Odessa here? Duncan shook his head. No, her original handler left for maternity leave. Nodding his understanding, Cade walked through the front door. Several feet past the entrance, he walked around the row of metal detectors. This tiny school has metal detectors, Duncan laughed. Cade slanted a brow. It's still New York here. Point taken. Cade led Duncan to the main office. He smiled at Lana Miles at the main desk. Morning, Lana. The woman's smile grew wide. Hey, Sheriff Myers, how's Mary? Cade rolled his eyes. Lana, this is an official visit. Principal Simmons is out on medical leave. I know, and I'm sure you can help me. Cade looked around, including the other two women in the office, when in the conversation with a smile. We'll do what we can do. What do you need, Sheriff? It's about Mandy Odessa. Did she tell any of you guys where she's headed for her leave? Lana shrugged and looked over at her shoulders at the other women. She didn't mention anything specific to me, and she would have. One of the other women chimed in. Mandy told me she was going to have a staycation, get some of her gardening done and some indoor repairs, updates that she had been putting off. Cade nodded and looked over at the marshal. Anything else? Does Mandy have a boyfriend? She's been dating Billy Tillman, Lana informed. Okay, ladies, thank you. Have a good one. Cade tapped the brim of his hat before leaving. On the way to the car, Marshal Duncan asked, You know this Tillman? Yeah, he's the new recruit over at the firehouse. It was a short ride to Eldred Firehouse. Cade's SUV took the last parking place. Wow, this place is full. This little town isn't so little, Duncan surprised laced his words. Getting out of the car and entering the one open bay, Cade answered, This is a Sullivan County fire station, not just for Eldred. These guys respond to fires all over the county. If it were just for Eldred, we'd hardly need this many firemen. Hey, Sheriff Myers, what's up? Lieutenant Tim Mendelson inquired, rolling from underneath the fire station's ambulance. He stood and pulled the cloth tucked inside his waistband, wiping his greasy hands. Hey, Tim, is Billy here? Tim tipped his head behind him. He's on mess duty today. He's cleaning up breakfast. Cade made his way to the kitchen. Sure enough, Billy was knee-deep in soapy water. Cade's salutatory smile slipped when he noticed Matt Madsen on the other side of the kitchen. Cade stopped short of displaying his annoyance at the other man's presence. Matt Madsen was his only serious competition for Mary. There were other single men in town who took a shine to Mary and wanted to get to know her on an intimate level. But Matt was the only one that was near Cade's and Mary's age group that wasn't already married or in a relationship. Matt was also physically appealing in the traditional sense. He was charming, and the whole town considered him a good guy. Until Mary came to their small hamlet, Cade had considered Matt one of his best friends. They hung out on their off hours, watched sports, played b-ball. Because of the nature of their jobs, they saw each other often during their work. Matt had been the paramedic that had responded when Cade called for an ambulance for Mary. The three had formed a friendship from the tense, unconventional meeting. It wasn't until after Mary was all healed and given a new identity so that she could earn a living and she had become settled into community that Cade realized he was falling for the shy beauty. And like had been his habit since they first became friends, Cade made the mistake of confiding in Matt. Matt had then made his own feelings clear. He too was falling for Mary. Matt had taken his confessions a step further, stating he planned on asking Mary out, and he'd appreciate if Cade respect his right to be with Mary more than his. Cade had been shocked that Matt was bringing race into their friendship. From the moment they met, Matt being black and Cade being white hadn't even made a blip in their friendship. Being from one of the biggest diverse melting pots in the world, Cade couldn't care less about someone's race. Their character is what mattered to him. He had thought Matt was of the same mind. Cade had been completely thrown by Matt playing the race card. After his shock abated, he became angry. What Matt was spouting about him being better for Mary simply because they both were black was the most ridiculous horseshit he had ever heard. And Cade wasn't standing for it. Fuck the bullshit and to hell with Matt. Even so, Cade had waited for Matt to ask Mary out first. They both were floored when she turned Matt down, albeit graciously. Confused, Cade had waited a full 2 weeks, watching while others had tried their luck, asking out Eldred's beautiful librarian. She had turned them all down with a sweet smile. Exactly 2 weeks after Matt, Cade asked Mary out for himself, expecting to be rejected like Matt and the others had been. Surprisingly, Mary had said yes. They had their first date on Saturday. He gave Mary a pause on Sunday so as not to smother her. A couple of the guys in town weren't taking no for an answer as graciously as Mary had given it, and she was being stalked by a supposedly secret admirer. So, after their successful date on Saturday, he wanted to give her space, even though Cade had found himself aching to call her all day Sunday. Today was Monday. He had every intention on calling Mary and not letting go of their momentum from their great date. From the look Matt was giving him, Cade could tell he was still very pissed Mary had said yes to Cade and no to him. Ignoring Matt's dirty look, he addressed Billy. Hey, Billy, have you seen Mandy Odessa? Billy dried his hands off on his uniform pants. I haven't seen her since Thursday. Taking in Cade's serious look and giving the man with him a curious glance, he asked, Is there something wrong? Shaking his head, Cade spoke. No, I just need to speak with her. Well, we have tentative plans to do the hiking trails on Wednesday and camp out until Friday. Cade and Marshall Duncan exchanged a look. Bringing his attention back to Billy, he added, Tell her to give me a call when you see her, unless you have an idea where she is right now. Billy shook his head. If she isn't at home, if she isn't at home in her garden, then I'm not sure where she might be. My best guess is the library. Her and Mary are pretty good friends. Cade nodded. Okay, thanks. Don't forget to have her call when you see her. Sure thing, Sheriff. Cade and Duncan turned to go when Matt spoke up. Sheriff Myers, can I speak with you for a minute? With a grim expression, Cade let Duncan know he'd meet him in the SUV. Then he and Matt exited the kitchen and went out a side door in the hallway. It led to the back of the firehouse. Man, there's a bunch of different characters in this book, girl. Whew. Immediately, as they cleared the door, Cade asked, What do you want, Madsen? I've been a hearing that you took Mary out on Saturday. Cade kept silent. Everyone knew him. Mary had gone out. He didn't have time for the obvious. His look conveyed his thoughts. Matt continued. I know you like her. Matt rolled his eyes and said with a feeling, everyone likes her. But I think she and I make a better couple than you and Mary. You've already told me this bullshit. What do you want? As you know, women in our age group in this area are few and far between. The good ones are married or taken. Mary should date me. We're more compatible than you and Mary. Cade's brow furrowed. How did you come by this pearl of wisdom? Because as far as I know, Mary doesn't know anything about herself before coming to Eldred. And since she's been here, she's shown an interest in books, kids, and her community. I'm the sheriff, and I love kids in this community. Matt scowled. You know what I'm talking about. Kay took a threatening step closer, getting in Matt's face. Yeah, I do know what you mean. You mean the same thing as those racist assholes who say people shouldn't date outside their race, dirtying up the gene pool by creating mixed babies. Some nonsense like that. Genuine surprise flashed across Matt's face. That's different. I am not a racist. Really? Because from where I'm standing, y'all look identical. I don't need or seek your permission to date someone I'm interested in. And the one person's permission I do need gave it. The same person who told you no. She made her feelings known on the subject, and now I have. Goodbye, Matt. With those final words, Cade did an about face and went through the firehouse to get to the exit he entered. Outside, unaware, Cade slammed his SUV's door. Marshal Duncan looked over at him from the passenger seat. Everything all right? Putting his shades on and backing out of the parking space, Cade pictured Mary's sweet smiles from their date, rather than Matt's scowling one of moments ago, answering the marshal. Everything is fine. Mary Smith pulled the keys to the library's front door out of her hefty purse. Breathing in the brisk, cool air, she smiled. Another new like. She loved cool, crisp fall air. It was pleasing to her senses. Mary walked from the library's employee parking lot in the back of the library. She liked the quiet of early mornings too. Her smile grew as she realized the immense joy she felt from relearning about the things she liked. 13 months ago, she woke up in a strange hospital bed, hurt and traumatized, without a single memory. She had thought her life was over and that she would never like anything again. But then her eyes connected with the most compelling, bluest, compassionate, honest looking eyes she had ever seen. Well, that she had seen thus far. Sheriff Cade Myers had been her quiet in the storm, her still waters in a riotous sea. He made her feel safe when she was scared, and she had no clue as to why she should be scared. He had a calming confidence about him that put her at unease at rest. It didn't hurt that he was also one of the finest looking men she had ever come across in her short memory. Although Mary didn't need her memories to know that Cade was exceptional in the looks category, she merely had to see the way every woman, young or old, married or single, responded to him. Oh no, Olivia's in the house. Hi, darling. If she didn't have all that to help clue her in to how incredibly good looking Kate is, she only had to register the reactions of her own body. His muscular physique, strongly chiseled jaw, firm lips, and sexy, penetrating, seemingly all-knowing blue eyes caused Mary's nether regions to clench when he spoke in his deep baritone, and her heart stuttered when he walked in a room. She deeply inhaled when around him became because of his because his scent was divine. Unlocking the front double doors and then the inner doors, Mary flicked the row of light switches to the right of the entrance. Nothing happened. Frowning, she tried the switches again. Other than the clicking sounds, nothing. She walked further into the library's main entrance, listening for any sound. Hearing nothing, she walked to the large circulation counter, placing her purse, lunch bag, and keys down on the empty surface. She walked past several tables and chairs, a small sofa, and the elevator to the first row of books, walking to the end towards the fuse box. As she reached the end of the row, her steps slowed. Her flesh began to crawl, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The creepily whispered, "Mary," froze her in place. Slam! Startled, Mary jumped. The repeated whisper caused her feet to start moving again, turn around, heading backwards toward the circulation counter. She came up fast on the desk, skidding to a halt as her eyes took in the only item on the surface, a pink flower. Her personal items were gone. Mary. The whisper sounded again. She did a slow circle. She couldn't tell where it was coming from. Slam! All Mary knew was that she was no longer alone. She had to get out of the library. The front entrance loomed invitingly in front of her. On one of her many lost memories was any movies she had seen. But there was a genre of movies she had grown a liking for in her 13 months of memory. Horror slasher films. She watched them all with a macabre fascination. They all had one thing in common: the dumb victim being led to the front door to an ambushed by the killer. Mary shook her head and turned running towards the farthest row of books. At the end of the last row was the back door. Mary picked up speed to full out running as the sounds grew louder and louder and louder. Slam! 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 Mary skidded and scrambled, falling to the floor in her attempt to stop her full speed ahead to the back door. From the floor, she looked up at the fully black-clad figure blocking the back door. His imposing stance had her turning while still on the floor and attempting to get her feet under her so she could get her ass off the ground. Her foot was grabbed in a tight grip. Mary looked over her shoulder into a face of complete blackness. She screamed at the top of her lungs, kicking her feet. She landed a well-placed kick to the figure's head. He let go of her foot. Without hesitation, Mary got on her feet and took off in the direction she had come. Looking over her shoulder, she spotted the man in pursuit. She screamed and switched her direction again, going down one of the other rows, keeping her gaze over her shoulder, making sure she was maintaining distance between her and her dark pursuer. With her attention intently behind her, shockwaves went through her entire body when she crashed into a solid wall. Mary's screams became truly horrified. Restraining arms locked around her. She beat uselessly at the ungiving wall. Mary! Mary! Mary was in such a state she didn't hear the words coming from somewhere outside her panic. Mary! Mary! It's Cate! Mary, sweetheart, it's Cate! Cate shook a completely terrified Mary, trying to get her whole awareness. Mary, it's Cate Myers! Suddenly, she stopped beating against the chest and looking over her shoulder. She went still and looked up into Cade's face. Locking onto his beautiful blue eyes in a small voice laced with fear, she questioned, Cate? He gave her a gentle smile. Yes, it's me, sweetheart. With a deep shudder, she collapsed against his chest, wrapping her arms around him, holding on tight. Oh, Cate, Cate, she hiccuped inside. You guys are cray-cray. Cate held her tightly to him, asking, What is it? What's wrong? Leaning away from him, tears streaming down her face, she pointed over her shoulder. He was right behind me. Instantly, Cate switched to his police persona. He gently pushed her towards the front. Go out the front doors to my car. Making sure Mary started towards the front, Cade started towards the back door as he heard it bang shut. Unsnapping the strap on his holstered gun, he cautiously approached the door, opening it in slow increments, peeking out and spotting a fast-moving figure all in black. Cade gave chase, running hard and fast to catch up. From several paces behind, Cade took note. The black-clad man was smaller than him, almost slight of build, and the fucker was fast. Cade poured on the speed as they traversed the back parking lot towards the woods. Cade deduced that the asshole was heading in the woods to get to the road that came out the other side. Proving Cade's guess correct, the figure sped up and entered the woods at neck break speed, causing Cade to lose sight of him. Cade pulled his weapon and ran harder. Entering the woods, he looked around, stopping for short seconds to listen. Hearing his suspect's mad dash through the foliage, slapping leaves and snapping twigs, Cade ran after him. Cade put on enough speed to get eyes on the perp again as he crashed through the last of the woods up ahead. As Cade was coming to the end of the woods, he heard a car door slam. Cade burst through the last of the trees as an engine roared to life. He spied a black Ford 4x4 speeding away. Cade took aim, firing at the tires unsuccessfully as it got smaller in the distance. Swearing, Cade keyed the mic on the shoulder. Panting, he talked into it. Zebra 1, this is Zebra 1 to Zebra 33. Zebra 33 here. I'm 1057, 1066 at the library. Copy, 1049. Dispatch. Right here, Sheriff, what you need? Sally's smooth tone called through his radio. Put a bolo out on a black Ford 4x4 with a chrome gun rack. Partial plate, Adam, David, Frank, 1. Copy that, Sheriff. Cade holstered his weapon as he continued to stare in the direction of the disappearing black Ford truck. Shaking his head, he took a deep breath and turned to make his way back to the library. It looked like Mary Stalker had just amped up his obsession of her. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 3 since I got started late, y'all. So, Mary nervously sat in the front of Cade's police vehicle. Her stomach was in knots until she heard his deep baritone over the radio. However, her shakes didn't cease until she saw his tall, muscular frame walk out of the library's front doors. She quickly opened the car door, leaving it standing open. She ran to Cade. Cade caught her in his arms, pulling her in tight as she laid her head against his chest and wrapped her arms around him. Oh, God, Cade, I was so scared. He gently stroked her back. He got away, but I promise you I'll get him. She looked up and his gaze locked on hers. They stared into one another's eyes. Mary felt their connection sizzling between them. By mutual silent consent, they reached for each other. Cade lowered his head and Mary stood on her toes. Their lips made soft contact and their connection intensified. Mary moaned and gasped, allowing Cade's tongue to enter her mouth. He felt the electricity that was between them, the same electricity he felt when she first opened her eyes and looked deeply, trustingly into his. As he admitted his own moan, Cade was blown away by his feelings for the woman in his arms. I think I used all my oxygen up. Their tongues twirled sexily, causing Cade to growl and end their kiss by giving her bottom lip a final gentle swap with his tongue. With his forehead against hers and his eyes shut tight, trying to get his body under control, he whispered, Baby, you do me in. I have to be the sheriff right now when all I want to be is your man and take you away from here. Mary leaned back to look at him, touching her lip where he had last stroked his tongue. Her look was one of wonder. Cate had witnessed enough of Mary's redo first looks. They had ranged from a slight frown, a mild smile, to a downright grossed out frown, and furrow to an awestruck look of wonder and pleasantly surprised. She was wearing her pleasantly surprised look. Her pleased looks had a way of puffing his chest in male pride. Their first kiss on their first date had raised her eyebrows in shock and had her grasping the back of his head and demanding in a sweet tone, "Do that again." The woman had a way of making a man feel as though he was magical or something. Cade was no exception. His smile turned a bit cocky as he continued to stare at him. As she continued to stare at him and wonder, her eyes lingering on his mouth. "Another new feeling?" Kate asked, his words filled with teasing gentleness. Slowly nodding, her fingers left her lips and reached up and stroked his. "Your mouth is incredible. It makes me feel so good." I went from totally terrified to my nipples growing hard and wanting to do more kissing. Kate choked back laughter as her hand left his mouth to rest on his chest. He pulled her back into his arms. "I am glad I am giving you these new feelings, and you find them so enjoyable." His voice grew gravelly. "I am especially glad you said yes to me and no to all those other guys. I couldn't be happier. I am your do-over first." She leaned back to catch his gaze with hers. She had a look of dawning realization. "Are you telling me any guy I go out with and kiss will bring about the same feeling?" Cade lost his desire to laugh or tease her. Narrowing his eyes, he told her the truth. "Hell no. Trust me, baby. What we feel when we kiss is rare. It doesn't feel the same with everyone." She nodded and laid her head back on his chest, squeezing him to her. "I'm glad too." "I'm glad I got here in time to stop whatever that asshole had in mind." On autopilot, Mary touched a finger to his lips. "Don't cuss." Cade watched Mary's eyes widen in shock. He could tell she was surprised. He figured it was her past persona acting on instinct when she did things out of the blue like that. Apparently, her past self didn't swear. He smiled gently. "I'll try not to around you." Shaking off her confusion over her unintentional action, she asked, "Why are you here so fortuitously?" What a word. Only a librarian would come up with that word. Glancing at the watch on her slender wrist, she added, You're normally at the station at this time." "I wanted to check on you. Sally told me you got something from your stalker on your door last night." Nodding, Mary confirmed. "He left a pink flower on my back door. It's identical to the one on the counter in the library." Just then, deputies Harold Boyd and Larry Struthers pulled into the parking lot, each parking their police cars on either side of Cade's SUV. They both hopped out, walking directly to Cade. The three went immediately into police mode. Later, Mary sat at the circulation counter, watching the forensic techs bag items that were out of place around the library. Apparently, the sounds Mary had heard when her stalker was harassing her was the sound of books being slammed onto the floor. Cade had called in the state police forensic team, hoping they could get prints from one of the items. He told her that the odds were slim, but worth the cost if there were prints. She had been outside for a while after the deputies first arrived. She had felt reluctant to release her hold on Cade, but she knew he had to do his sheriff duties regardless of her feelings of need. Cade and the deputies went off to inspect the library and its perimeter while she had spent over 20 minutes turning patrons away, explaining that the library was closed until further notice. Lana Miles had left the school to check in on her. She came running up to Mary. "Mary, what is going on? You okay? Miss Pern came in the school to pick up her grandson because he threw up getting off the bus this morning and said there was a bunch of cop cars here." Since deciding to stay in Eldred after establishing her new identity, Mary had become close with two of the elementary school employees. Lana Miles, a secretary in the main office, and Mandy Odessa, a teacher. She gave Lana a shaky smile. It's okay, nothing too serious. I just got scared. Lana looked around at the cop cars and the state police van. Seems like a lot seems like a lot of trouble for nothing too serious. Someone was in the library when I arrived. He scared me. Sheriff Myers interrupted the guy, whatever he was doing. The sheriff gave chase out the back door, but the guy got away. Lana's eyes got big. Wow, I tell ya, this town was pretty sleepy until you and Sheriff Myers showed up. At Mary's worried frown, Lana clarified, oh, honey, I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Don't worry. I'm sure Cade will get the creep pretty soon. Mary smiled at Lana's teasing about her hesitation over calling Cade by his first name. I just I just don't want to be disrespectful. He's here in his sheriff capacity, not the sexy, drool-worthy, hot bod boyfriend capacity. Lana laughed as Mary blushed. Soon after, Lana left, promising to be at Mary's place later with a takeout and ready to hear about her date with Cade this past Saturday. Now, from her vantage point behind the counter, she watched the activity and sneaked peeks at Cade. He was easily the best looking and most impressive man in the room, both physically and in demeanor. He was in charge, but he wasn't overbearing about it. He had kindness in his directions. He made his orders sound like he was seeking a favor. Mary got the sense that could change quickly if needed. On their date, he had been the consummate gentleman, impeccable manners, even at the end when he had taken her in his arms to kiss her. He had ensured Mary's permission before proceeding to blow her top and curl her toes with his kiss. She couldn't wait to get even closer with Cade. I forgot the voice I had for him, but we'll go with this one. I think it's the wrong one, but we'll go anyway. Mary, thank goodness. The words brought Mary's concentrated, alert attention and thoughts from Cade's sexiness to Matt Madsen's worried gaze. Mary didn't know what to make of him. She got a strange vibe from Matt. He seemed to be always on the verge of saying something, and then whatever comes out of his mouth is something other than what his look implied. It was the strangest feeling Mary had gotten from anyone else in town. There was something that didn't quite ring true about him. It was the reason she didn't accept his offer of a date. Well, that and the fact that she hadn't been drawn to anyone other than Cade. Looking at Matt now, she got the same odd feeling of something being not quite right. Something she couldn't put her finger on, but nagged at the back of her consciousness. For example, the intense concern on his face. Why was it even there to that degree? Mary was far closer with Lana and, of course, Cade, and neither's concern appeared this strong. Mary got the suspicion that Matt would have pulled her into his arms if the circulation counter weren't separating them. Frowning, she stood and took a small step back, putting even more space between them. Matt, hello. What are you doing here? What do you mean? I heard over the lieutenant's radio all the different departments being dispatched here. Matt gave her a for shame look. Of course, I'd come to make sure you were okay. Mary didn't know what to say. She continued to frown at him in silence, puzzling over his actions. He acted as though they were in a relationship. Strange. Mary gave him a reluctant smile and said, I am all right. Thank you, Matt. Matt looked around at the activity and suggested, why don't you let me take you home? Obviously, the library is closed for the day. Mary was shocked. Not knowing what to say, she nervously wiped her hands down her sides and stuttered, oh, that's all. Mary is fine, Madsen. I'll take her home when I'm done here. Cade's tone was cool as he walked up to the counter. Matt's look turned irritated as he insisted, I can take her. It's not necessary. Cade was just as insistent. Mary's eyes ping-ponged between them. They seemed to be playing a game among themselves, a game that had absolutely nothing to do with her. That's okay, gentlemen. I drove here. I can get myself home when I'm ready. The two men glared at one another for several seconds more before turning much gentler gazes toward her. Cate smiled and gave her a wink. Okay. Matt's mouth slanted in a smile a little less appealing than Cade's had offered. I can wait and follow you to make sure you get there safely. Frowning deeply, Mary was at a loss in what else to say to Matt. Cade wasn't. She already has a stalker. Thanks, but no thanks. Matt turned an angry face to Cade. I was making this offer as a friend. What's the matter? Matt smirked. Hotshot sheriff can't handle the competition? With an unworried chuckle, Cade answered. From where I'm standing, there is none. Giving Mary one last wink, he turned his back on Matt, returning to the group of state lab guys. Matt's eyes narrowed in dislike at Cade's back. He turned around to find Mary looking at him in disapproval. He quickly fixed his features. I really don't mind waiting. I'll sit outside until you're ready. Matt turned, walking out the door, not waiting for Mary to answer one way or the other. Shaking her head, she sat and waited until Cade said it was okay to leave. Cade watched Madsen leave. He smirked, half listening to the state lab techs telling him his chances of getting anything concrete from their evidence gathering was slim to nil. Cade already knew it was a long shot, but he figured it couldn't hurt. Madsen was annoying as hell. Mary made it plain who she wanted to date. What was his problem? Cade couldn't figure out why he changed so drastically from the buddy he used to hang out with to this racist asshole he was now. Of course, his attitude change had to do with him wanting Mary too, but he didn't understand Madsen's belief that he shouldn't be with Mary instead based on race. It was a ridiculous, antiquated ideology. Cade had no plans to stop dating Mary. Madsen could go pound sand. Cade sighed. He had too much going on to worry about Madsen's racist ass. He had to stop the Red X prankster, find Mandy Odessa, arrest Mary Stalker, stop a possible hitman, and still find time to handle the uptick in minor crime for the holidays. Halloween was in 3 days. He had to wrap some of this shit up. He was looking forward to spending the holidays getting to know Mary and getting closer to her. He glanced over and found her watching him with an expression on her face he was beginning to like a lot. It was filled with admiration, feminine approval, with a hint of lust. Oh, hell yeah. Cade wanted to explore these new things between he and Mary. Seeing motion in his peripheral, his attention left Mary's beautiful face to the front door of the library. Marshall Duncan entered, stopping a few feet in until he spotted Cade and walked over. Sheriff, I've checked Mandy Odessa's place again. She's not there. Car is gone. There is not much else I can do until someone has a sighting or knows her location. You're heading out? Cade asked. I'm going to stay for a few days and search, see if I can get a handle on her timeline, specifically the 24 hours before the last time she was seen. My deputies and I will keep an eye out for her. Offering his hand, Marshall Duncan added, I appreciate it. I'm staying at the motor inn out on the highway right before you enter town. Cade shook his head. I know it. Tapping a finger to his hat in a way of goodbye, he watched Marshall Duncan leave. Cade walked over to Mary, loving that her smile grew with each step he made. So, do you want to hang out for a bit here until I'm done overseeing the scene, or do you want one of my men to take you home? He'll be stationed outside your house until I get there. Mary's smile held an inviting warmth. Her delicious lips parted slightly as if she were gasping in surprise. Cade nearly groaned thinking about tasting her mouth and making her gasp again. Mary's eyelids fluttered down shyly, like she knew what he was thinking. Softly, she said, I'll wait for you. With his signature wink and a smile, he turned back to his job. Okay, 2 pages and I'm done. Casey Tillman and Callie Kramer walked up the steep hill. Puffing and stopping every few steps, Callie asked in an annoyed tone, How much further? You'd get up the hill with less strain if you'd shut up and just walk. Flipping Casey the bird, Callie stomped her next few feet. He got on her last nerve. He had said it was a short walk. What they were actually doing was climbing, and there was nothing short about it in Callie's book. What was she doing out here anyway? Her inner voice answered her. You wanted a date for the Halloween dance and decided Casey Tillman was a good choice. Huffing and puffing audibly, Kelly panted out, Why do we need to go so high up? Without turning around, Casey said in a long measured tone, The people in charge of town planning stuff put it up here so it wouldn't have easy access. If it's so hard to get to, how are you going to access it? This time Casey did turn around, holding aloft a ring with a bunch of keys. I have my brother's keys from the firehouse. His lieutenant fills in at the power company as an electrical engineer, so he has all access to stuff like this. A few months ago, there was a fire at the gas station, and there was a down power line, and the lieutenant sent my brother to come and turn on the power from this manual switch. I was with him. Later at home, I swapped the keys. My brother thought he lost them. Standing still, Callie eyed Casey with a bit of worry. You've been planning this for months? Casey rolled his eyes. No, stupid. I just thought of it. I just took the keys because, I don't know, just in case. Callie nodded her understanding, not understanding at all. Okay, so why are we doing this again? It'll be fun to see them run around looking for the cause before they think of the transfer switch up here. Shaking her head, Callie told him a home truth. Your ideal of fun isn't fun. Just stop talking so you can walk better. For a girl with a nice bod, you sure suck at physical stuff. All Kelly heard was a nice bod. You think I have a nice body? God, teenagers. Casey rolled his eyes again, pulling his hoodie over his head and the front over his nose. Come on, cover yourself. We're almost there. With a long-suffering sigh, Kelly did as she was told. Casey had told her to dress in all black and to wear a hoodie, not her all too identifiable pink coat. She stomped behind Casey, grumbling about the incline when he finally stopped in front of a fence that looked like it was built into the hillside. It enclosed a small concrete structure with lead pipes coming from the ground into a huge black metal box. Casey used the keys on the large padlock on the fence's entrance. He turned and smiled, holding the lock triumphantly in the air. Callie shook her head. Now what? Casey grinned evilly as he took out a spray can of red paint. Now the fun begins. My poor voice. This pollen's going to kill me, y'all. I'm telling you. Cate, might take me a few weeks, but I'm going to finish this book. I like these kind of books. No, Miss Olivia, I'm done. Can you not hear my voice leaving me, sister? Listen to this. Lord, it's the Olivia and Ori show. Cate, thank you for letting me read this. I greatly appreciate it. And the rest of you, go chill out. Nina, do I have a read Sunday? Please say no. My voice needs to rest. Oops, that's what I want. And I do. The crap am I reading? All right, I gotta read y'all. Sienna Grant's anagram. I don't know, and I have one after that. Anna Balin, Max. These are two new to me. All right, you guys. Go have a good night. I'm going to get vaccinated in the morning, and then I have to go in the office. I haven't been in the office in a year, you guys. Oh, I'm dreading it so bad. I know, Miss Olivia. I love you, darling. I love you too, Ori, Vincy, and Cate, and Jackie. All right, everybody. Have a good evening, and I'll holler at you guys later. Happy reading.